Haugen.
Parker Voth.
Josh Drackley.
Gabrielle Hinrichs.
Great moments are born from great opportunities. And that's what you have here tonight, boys. That's what you've earned here tonight. One game. This quote comes from the movie Miracle, based on the famous Miracle on Ice, when the Soviet Union team, the best hockey team in the world, was defeated by the underdog US team at the 1980 Winter Olympics.
According to a survey we took, everyone in this classroom has been to a sporting event, and we all know how sports affect our lives, as players and as spectators.
4 major sports in the United States have come a long way since they began.
First, we will talk about baseball. Second, we will discuss basketball. Third, we will talk about football. Second, we will talk about football. Third, we will talk about basketball. And fourth, we will talk about hockey. Baseball is one of the oldest sports in the United States of America. According to Harvey Frommer, a man in his 44th year of sports writing, and with over 28 books published, in his book, Old Time Baseball, America's Pastime in the Gilded Age, published in 2016, he stated that Alexander Cartwright was one of the first people to write down and distinguish his rules of baseball from all the others in the area. In 1834, the first book of instructions on how to play the game of baseball was published. Alexander Cartwright went on to form the Knickerbocker Baseball Club in 1845, one of the first of its kind in the New York area. In 1857, a baseball committee ruled that there would be 9 innings to a professional game of baseball. And this has gone on to become part of modern baseball. Stephen A. Rice, a history professor who was formerly the Bernard Brummel Distinguished Research Professor in the Department of History at the Northeastern Illinois University, in his book, Sports in America, From Colonial Times to the 21st Century, an encyclopedia, published in 2015, stated that early baseball has evolved a lot on its way to become modern baseball. In the 1850s, the first players were small businessmen and artisans who shared many of the same ethics and positive values. These things such as self-control and cooperation. The next players based their teams on their occupation, ethnicity, and the neighborhood that they lived in. The American Civil War was when the first championship game of baseball was played. This helped boost the morale of the citizens in New York and helped rise baseball's interest in America. And baseball kept on rising in fame up until 1919, when the baseball team, the White Sox, damaged baseball's reputation by colluding with gamblers to lose the World Series. Right after them was one of the most renowned players that everyone knows in baseball, Babe Ruth. He played during the 1920s and had over 714 home runs in his career. But unfortunately, baseball was losing viewers because of the scandal and just loss of interest. In 1946, Jackie Robinson broke the color line in baseball by being the first African-American player to play in the Major League Baseball League in America, opening the door for many other African-American and other minorities to join the game. According to Dr. Peter Chalmers, a member of the University of Utah in the Department of Orthopedic Surgery, in American Journal of Orthopedics, published in March 2016, he stated that baseball had over 11 million viewers for their All-Star finale, and for their World Series finale, over 14 million viewers annually. Social media has grown in coverage of baseball over the years, so it's now quite prominent in social media. The teams all over the world, there are over 360 pitchers. 25 to 35% of them have had to have surgery on their arm due to too much of their pitching a lot during their games. Now we will talk about football.
Football is packed full of rich history. It was one of the first sports in the United States, according to the official NFL website, a trusted organization for almost 100 years, in their most recent History by Decade post. Football was invented in the late 1800s by Walter Camp, also known as the father of gridiron football. It was formed from the sport rugby, which came over from Europe. The first game was between Rutgers and Princeton on November 6, 1869. Rutgers won the game 6-4 back when the rules were different and the points for a score were less. Football has been evolving since it first began. The American Professional Football Association was founded in 1920. They later changed their name to the National Football League in 1922. There were 14 teams in the beginning at that time. Many teams have been diminished or relocated throughout the century, like the Houston Oilers moving to be the Tennessee Titans, the Baltimore Colts moving to be the Indianapolis Colts, or even the Los Angeles Rams moving to St. Louis just to move back to Los Angeles a couple of years ago. The National Football League Players Association was founded in 1956. The NFLPA is a labor organization that represents its players. The first Super Bowl was in 1967 between the Green Bay Packers and the Kansas City Chiefs. Green Bay won that game 35-10 to capture the first ever Super Bowl win. The rating for that game was 22.6 and about 24 million viewers. Equipment has also changed dramatically throughout its history. The first leather helmet was introduced in the late 1800s by Joseph Reeves, according to Amy Daughters, a sports writer for Bleacher Report, who studied at Texas Tech University and has written numerous sports articles in the past decade in the journal Evolution of Football Equipment, updated in October of 2017. In 1915, ear holes were added so that players could hear better. In 1939, John Riddell and his son made the first plastic helmet, which was supposedly safer than leather. In 1940, the chin strap was added to the helmet so that the helmet wouldn't fly off a player's head. In 1955, the single bar face mask was added, followed by more bars in 1962. In 1972, air cushions were added to the helmet. In 2004, the single bar face mask was banned due to lack of protection for the face. Other equipment like pants, jerseys, and shoulder pads have gotten smaller and lighter in order to improve mobility for the players. The ball also started off round and has gotten more elongated throughout history. Today, football is one of the most watched and attended sports in America. There are up to 32 teams in the NFL now. Super Bowl 53 had a rating of 41.1 and about 98 million viewers worldwide, as reported by Nielsen, a global measurement and data analytics company for over 90 years, in their post of all of the past Super Bowl ratings, updated in February of 2019. The build of the average player is also way different than it used to be. Players are now stronger and faster in today's game. The game of football is also way more sophisticated than it once was. Now that we've talked about football, we will discuss basketball.
James Naismith, a lifelong chapel director and physical education coach at the University of Kansas, was the single person to invent the game of basketball. In 1891, Naismith traveled to the University of Springfield as a graduate student. A wild blizzard erupted in Illinois that spring. Students, forced to stay inside, were tearing apart the campus. According to Paul Cosby, a professor of psychology at California State University, in his journal, James Naismith, published in 2016, James Naismith was quoted in 1936 in an interview saying this: "Something had to be done, so I had an idea. I brought all the boys into the gym and divided them into 2 teams of 9. I gave them an old soccer ball. I nailed a peach basket to each end of the gym and told the boys the goal is to throw the ball into the other team's peach basket." This game in 1891 quickly turned into more of a football game than a basketball game. So, Naismith developed 13 rules for the game of basketball, many of which have stuck with us today, such as dribbling the basketball. The game quickly developed into 5-member teams, with the first professional game being played in 1896, just 5 years after its introduction. As the game developed into the 1920s, hundreds of teams and leagues popped up across the United States. The game really exploded in 1946 when the Basketball Association of America was formed. The BAA would later become known as the NBA, or National Basketball Association, as we still call it today. The game at this time was very slow. With the shot clock not yet implemented, games would often become stagnant. With teams making less than 40% of their shots, there was really no incentive for them to shoot. Teams would often foul in order to protect their leads. According to Steve Oshburner, a writer on the National Basketball Association since 1980, in his journal Top Moments, published in 2019, this very such thing happened in a 1953 playoff game. Bob Cousy set playoff records by shooting 30 of 32 from the free throw line. This style of play would continue into the 1960s. A much faster paced game would develop, along with adding the three-point line, provided for a much more exciting game of basketball for the fans. Early basketball legends like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Julius Erving brought national attention to the sport. According to Kwame Fisher-Brown, an NBA columnist for major sports magazines, in the journal Bleacher Report, published in 2011, the NBA was making nearly $50 million each year by the year 1988 to televise live national basketball games. The faster-paced game developed into the 1990s. Dunks and three-pointers made for a much more exciting game of basketball. These developments led basketball to the game as we know it today. Players like LeBron James, Steph Curry, and Giannis Antetokounmpo have shaped basketball into a national pastime. Three-pointers transformed the game of basketball. From the top 9 most three-pointers made in a single season are from the past 5 years, and 4 of those 9 are from this past season alone. Three-pointers rose the viewership of basketball. The 2018 NBA Finals were watched by 18 million people per game, and the 2019 NCAA Finals were watched by 23 million people. To put this into context, the state of Minnesota's population is just 6 million people. This exciting new form of basketball has been great for the fans. The game has evolved tremendously since 1891 while still maintaining the same fundamentals that Naismith developed. Now that we have talked about basketball, we will be discussing hockey.
Hockey has a long and interesting history. Ice hockey started in the early 1800s. Ice hockey is believed to have been started by the Micmac Indians in Canada. Early ice hockey games allowed as many as 30 players aside on the ice at one time, and the goals were 2 stones, each frozen into one end of the ice. According to Gerald Eskenazi, a sports writer for the New York Times and author of the book Hockey, A Thinking Man's Guide to Pro Hockey, in the Encyclopedia Britannica, a source of knowledge for over 250 years, in the entry Ice Hockey, updated March 7, 2019, states that the name hockey comes from the French word for a shepherd's stick. The first log games of ice hockey were played in the 1850s, and in the 1870s, the first set of rules for ice hockey was written by students at McGill University in Montreal, Canada. Ice hockey quickly spread through and out of Canada, and it was spread through Canada by British and Scottish immigrants as well as the British Army. Ice hockey first debuted in the United States around 1893. Ice hockey has evolved since it began. The evolution of ice hockey has an interesting timeline. The first acknowledged hockey team, the Portage Lakers, was formed in Michigan in 1903. In 1904, the same man that formed the Portage Lakers formed the first acknowledged professional hockey league, the International Pro Hockey League. The National Hockey League, or as we know it, the NHL, was formed in 1917. 1920 was the first year that hockey was at the Olympics. One of the greatest expansions in sports history occurred in 1967 when the NHL doubled in size to 12 teams. In 1979, the NHL merged with the World Hockey Association, which had just formed 7 years earlier. And by 2017, there were 31 teams in the NHL. There have been some changes to the rules and equipment of ice hockey. Although there aren't many major changes between today's ice hockey rules and the initial rules set forth in the 1870s, there have been a few main changes. 2 of those changes include a decrease from 9 players on the ice at a time to 6, and the addition of netting to the goals in the early 1900s. There have been 2 inventions that helped shape ice hockey. One of these inventions is the Zamboni. The Zamboni ice resurfacer was invented by Frank Zamboni in 1949. According to Brandon J. Smith, the state news reporter for Indiana Public Broadcasting, who has written countless articles about the history of sports on thepeoplehistory.com, a free educational resource with over 10 years of research, updated in 2019, states that the Zamboni was first used in an NHL game in 1952. Today, the Zamboni is used in nearly every ice rink around the United States and even the world. Another invention that changed ice hockey is the face mask. Jacques Plante was a hockey player who had been hit in the face 2 times during hockey games when he enlisted the help of someone to make a fiberglass face mask molded to fit his face. His coach only let him wear it for practice and wouldn't let him wear it for games, worried that it would distract him. However, when Plante was hit in the face a 3rd time, he refused to get on the ice without his face mask. His coach let him wear it, and it is now a staple for hockey players all over the world. Today, ice hockey is a very popular sport. Game 6 of the 2014-2015 NHL season was watched by over 8 million people. Today's hockey stars are major figures in the sports world. Hockey is an established part of the Olympics in both men's and women's categories.
First, we talked about baseball. Second, we talked about football.
Third, we discussed basketball, and finally, we informed you on hockey.
4 major sports in the United States have come a long way since they began.
The U.S. hockey victory at the 1980 Winter Olympics has always been hailed as a miracle, but was more realistically the result of the hard work and dedication that we all know goes into sports. Hopefully after you've heard our speech, you can see that hard work and dedication has also influenced the evolution of these sports throughout the years.